Hello and welcome to Nation Watch. Thank you for joining us from wherever you're joining us. Trust that you will stay with us for the duration of the program as you usually do. I'm your host, Mervyn Williams. This is Nation Watch, a production of the People's National Congress Reform. We bid welcome to the month of December 2024. And as we inch closer to Christmas, at the front of our minds, we must also recognize that we're inching closer and closer to regional and general elections. And in the process, our focus is to, by all legal means, remove the People's Progressive Party from government and to allow Guyana to breathe again. Ladies and gentlemen, the usually quiet indigenous village of St. Cuthbert's Mission was plunged into mourning yesterday evening following a horrific accident involving two motor vehicles. The accident resulted in tragedy not just for a village, for a family, but for the entire indigenous population of Guyana. Olivia Andrews, age 69, her daughter, Atina Andrews, age 29, and Olivia's granddaughter, Emma Andrews, age 7, died yesterday evening. Little Danielle, age 6, is in hospital, seriously injured. 49-year-old Evan Simon is also hospitalized. Javez Simon, 25 years old, also hospitalized. Their respective conditions vary. We do not know exactly in what state they are at the moment, but I take this opportunity on behalf of the leader, executive, and members of the People's National Congress Reform, and indeed on my own behalf, to extend sincere condolences to the family, relatives, friends of the deceased, to the elected leadership of the indigenous village of St. Cuthbert's Mission, and indeed to all of the residents of that village. We extend our sincere condolences at this very, very sad time in the life of that village. It was a tragedy which could have been avoided, but as fate would have it, it was not. We mourn with the village, and we pray that the lives of those affected can be bearable, tolerable, improved over time, and eventually properly mended. There are too many accidents on our roadways. Too many lives are being lost on our roads. Too many fires in our society. And we seem helpless in the face of the losses that occur as a consequence. We move on with Nation Watch. I am joined by Mr. Rawle, economist, accountant, educator, as we continue to discuss this rich and failing economy that is ours, as we continue to explore what our reality as a country really in the face of PPP mismanagement of our economy, as we bring information to you to help you to decide to terminate the services of the People's Progressive Party at the next election. Mr. Lucas, welcome to Nation Watch.
Thank you very much, Mervyn. And perhaps before you move on, I would also like to express my sympathy and condolences for the family that suffered that tragedy in the accident that you referred to yesterday. So my thoughts and prayers are with them.
It is a dark time. It is a dark time. But we will try to get through this program, circumstances notwithstanding. Mr. Lucas, the most topical thing perhaps among working class people in this country, among poor people in this country, among people hardest hit by the out of control cost of living in this country, is the question of a cash grant that has been announced, one that was presented by the head of government, the head of state, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, a full sitting of the parliament of this country, as a cash grant that will be paid out instantaneously. But then came Barrett Jagdeo contradicting the man who holds all of these positions by saying, no, not instantaneously, over a 5-month period. And then we heard the president come back and say that this money will be paid out before the end of the year. That is after he said before Christmas. But now we're hearing that some people will get before the end of the year, others after budget 2025. The question we raised here last Sunday was whether there was proper authorization for the spending, whether the spending was in fact lawful spending, having regard to the fact that up to last Sunday, there was no budgetary allocation. There was no passage of any financial papers with regard to this payout. Subsequent to Sunday, we learned of a financial paper being approved for the sum of 30.6 billion and not 60 billion as previously announced. Many varying positions, creating in the minds of citizens, first of all, the legitimate expectation that they'll have money in their hands by a certain time, and then stretching the deadline over and over again until you get to budget 2025, which will be at an unknown date. What does this do for the citizens of this country who are suffering under the burden of high prices?
Well, once again, Mervyn, it's a very interesting topic that you have raised and that you're asking me to comment on. The thing that I'm still trying to grapple with, and I'm not so sure that it was made clear in the financial paper that was submitted to Parliament, is what is the purpose of the cash grant. It seems to me that it cannot be about easing the cost of living, because the pain in the cost of living is now. And the indications are that the payout of this cash grant will be over an extended period. So I don't know if the PPP is expecting that the cost of living pain to be drawn out for as long as they believe they must be making these cash grants payable. But that is not rational thinking. So something is wrong there. The other problem that I have relates to the fact that it cannot be about relieving poverty because, as I understand it, this cash grant is for all Guyanese, rich and poor. So I'm really trying to understand what is the purpose of the cash grant. And I believe, the opposition must insist on getting an explanation, a proper explanation from the government as to what is the reason for paying out this cash grant. I'm not saying that getting money isn't good, but at least for the purpose of the citizens of this country understanding, whether or not proper financial management is taking place in this country, it appears to me that it is absolutely necessary for the government to explain as to what's the purpose of this money. Because it doesn't look as if it is the ease cost of living, because, as I said, seems to be a very extended process. And certainly it can be about poverty, because I don't know why some of the richest people in this country would be expecting to receive a payment from the government. So I mean, they need to help us to understand exactly what is happening.
We have issues with purpose. All Guyanese acknowledge that a cash grant, in fact, it was the opposition that started the conversation on a cash grant and the need for a cash grant. Some parties in the opposition differed on their perspective in terms of sustained payments, in terms of whether it should be one-off, in terms of the value, and so on. Mm-hmm. Purpose aside, faulty authorization process. I mean, there was no apology to the National Assembly by the minister responsible for finance in the office of the president to say, look, we apologize to the people of the country who pay us our salaries for having paid out their monies without first getting authorization. We are here now to correct that situation. And we ask you to approve this paper, recognizing that we've already spent some of the money from it.
Right.
No decency from the People's Progressive Party in terms of authorization.
Yes.
Just like there was no decency in the switch around from instantaneously to we don't know when for sure. So purpose and authorization aside, Mr. Lucas, we know that when the AP and UFC was in government, it determined that if there were projects to be funded from the Natural Resource Fund, those projects are supposed to be properly documented, pass the proof, all the proofing that is necessary, mm-hmm. and benefit from all the oversight that was put in place, which included representation from NGOs and regional administrations and all that, mm-hmm. before it could be funded. And you knew from that position what projects were going to be funded by the Natural Resource Fund. The PPP changed that and dumped all of the resources into the consolidated fund and spent at will. We do not yet know the source from which this money comes. Help us understand if you can.
Well, I mean, again, that's a very pertinent observation to make. But before commenting on that, I think it is important for people to understand why it is the opposition initially would have thought it useful um, to utilize the mechanism of the cash grant. Cash grants have been seen to be very effective and useful tools in helping to deal with either a situation of poverty or even um, unforeseen circumstances that might have arisen, some disaster or something that could have arrived. You know, in the past, greater emphasis was placed on providing in kind service or assistance to people.
Mm-hmm.
But that involved a tremendous amount of logistics, which did not always go too well. And what um, agencies, donor agencies, and grant givers have discovered is that cash grants are a very cost-effective way of providing relief or assistance, uh, to people. The other thing that they have found with the cash grant, and this is another reason why the opposition would have supported the use of cash grants, particularly coming out of our special fund, is that it provides people with, or it treats people decently. Apart from empowering them to do the things that they want to do, because they're the ones who could decide how to spend that money, what the priorities are in their household, and so forth. Um, it provides them with respect. It treats them with respect because I'm sure people have seen images of in-kind assistance being delivered, where things are being dropped in the air, things are being thrown at people and so forth, and people are running helter-skelter just to get some of what is being provided. But the cash grant instead avoids all of that spectacle, and therefore allows people to receive help in a more humane and decent manner. And so, for me, the cash grant is a very, very useful tool in helping people to get money. But when you think of what has happened in this country, particularly with this particular program relating to the cash grants that was announced by the president sometime back in early November, was it? I think. What we're seeing, the current experience points out three things to me. I mean, apart from the disrespect and even the prime minister failing to apologize to the nation, since I understand this program is coming out of his office.
But we still have a prime minister, right?
Well, I hope so. I think I was told this,
Okay.
whom I understand is, according to the Constitution, is supposed to be the first
vice president.
Yeah. But you would never know that he holds that portfolio.
Or that he exists, for that matter, in my view.
Well, that's another story. But here's the thing. The confusion that we are seeing here with this cash grant, identifies a couple of things for us. And as people, citizens of this country, we ought to pay attention to it to ensure that, one, we can correct the problems that are existing, and two, ensure that the new government that comes in is not allowed to conduct the affairs of state in this manner. There's a clear lack of planning. This is most evident in the way in which the cash grant issue is evolving as of now. Then, of course, there's obvious discord in the government. And when the discord, the disagreements in government begin to emerge in public, therefore, that the management structure of your country is weakening. It's becoming weaker. So not only are your institutions in trouble, but those managing the institutions are clearly demonstrating that they either don't have the wherewithal, the ability, or they have the interest in managing the resources and institutions of this country properly. And of course, this lesson in chaos and disorganization, in my view, requires us to rethink, how cash grants should be delivered in future. We don't know. We might not have the correct format at the moment, but I do believe that there are formats that exist that would deliver these cash grants in a much more predictable and sustained manner. And I think that this is something I hope the opposition will try to pursue in an effort to ensure that we can bring some semblance of control back to the way in which our public finances are managed. Now, you did point, of course, to the question of where is this money coming from?
Yep.
And indeed, I think it is correct to ask where or what is the predicate source of this money. I mean, they haven't told us. I don't know if the money is coming from tax revenues that they have been collecting over the period. I don't know if it is coming from the dividends and lease income that the government gets, for leasing out lands and concessions and selling lands and so forth. I don't know. Because we don't seem to know what happens to some of that money. We don't know if the money is coming from the Natural Resource Fund, or if it's a combination of all of these things. I mean, the disorganization is so obvious that something as straightforward as telling people the source of funds is something that they have failed to do with this cash grant that they are paying out.
Mr. Lucas, I think the rest of the world is laughing at us as a country. This government is so inefficient, so unworthy of the trust of the citizens. In Brazil, there are 26 states and 1 federal district. There are 5,570 municipalities. In Guyana, we have 10 municipalities and 70 NDCs spread across within 10 administrative regions. We can't manage 70 NDCs and 10 municipalities. And in Brazil, they're managing 26 states, a federal district, and 5,570 municipalities. And I can tell you that when it comes to taking social assistance, be it pensions or some other form of cash disbursement to the vulnerable in society, the military is involved if it comes to logistically tough environments. There's a schedule when maritime vessels, when Navy vessels will go out there into the rural riverine areas where the indigenous peoples live. Routinely, Mr. Lucas, people, as we old people say, you could put your pot on the fire and know that at this day, at this time, they will be there.
Yeah, well,
And they're there. Why can't this administration fix a simple problem of paying $100,000 to every adult Guyanese citizen living here? What's the problem?
yeah, well, let's ask ourselves this question. Is this the first time we are paying out a cash grant?
No, and it's not
No,
the first time we're making a mess of it either.
precisely. So, it tells you that there is very little interest in ensuring that the resources of this country are managed properly. And I'm telling you, nothing was more evident of that than the refusal of the PPP to establish the Public Procurement Commission. It was passed, it was in the Constitution. And it was not until the coalition government went into power that that thing, which has now forced them in a way to manage some of the funds that they're spending properly. So something has to happen, something similar has to happen, to get them to manage the payout of these cash grants properly. The lack of appreciation and interest in ensuring that the people of this country are served well is the problem. It is clear that what you're dealing with is a government that may display all sorts of fancy things, new roads, they may display all sorts of banners around the place and buildings and slogans and so forth. All of those things may be on display. But I'm saying what they are not paying attention to is the efficient use of our resources and the proper management of our resources. And I have no interest in anybody telling me that we have an auditor general who, audits government reports and so forth. And we have a public accounts committee that reviews the accounts in the National Assembly. And that's utter nonsense, because by the time that information becomes available and people can query it, water has already gone under the bridge.
But even with respect to the functions of the Auditor General, you have a Minister of Government condemning the findings of the Auditor General, saying that you're wrong. These things are not right. These things are not true. I mean, where does the administration get off? You had a sitting member of parliament calling for judge to be defrocked because a decision was made in favor of the party that he's from, that formed the government.
Yeah.
You have a minister finding fault and condemning the Auditor General because she was not satisfied with what his report said. This is a lawless administration. The People's Progressive Party seems to be characterized by, among other things, 3 C's: corruption, crime, and high cost of living.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's sufficient evidence of that. And in fact, talking about cost of living, we can begin to understand why that is happening. And we have to take a look at what the 2024 data says. But you're beginning to see from some of the data that already exists out there that cost of living is a major problem in this country. And let me give you an indication. Between, or I should say from 2015 to 2019, consumer goods, imported consumer goods, represented about 13% of the total supply in terms of value of goods that were available for sale and consumption in Guyana. From 2020 to 2023, it has risen to about 21%. In 2023 alone, it had gone up to 24%. So what that's telling you,
That's almost double.
yes, and so what's telling you is that the supply of goods produced in Guyana is diminishing. That's what it's telling you because we're relying more on imports. And what I find interesting, and what I hope we would be able to do if we can get support in examining the data is to see whether or not the tax concessions that the government has been giving to businesses in this country are working. Because as you know, the government claims that there's been some concessions made on excise taxes. There some concessions made on VAT.
But invariably, those are never passed down to the consumer in this country.
Well, that's the other problem we have here. So here you have a government that is telling people that it is doing something to support the reduction of the cost of living, but not really paying attention as to whether that is actually happening. Because, as I said, we don't know, but what we do know is in the change of every, level of consumption in terms of the values that you look at, there's always a substitution effect and an income effect. What it means is that either prices could be going up and quantities declining, which could very well be the case here. And with prices going up, we don't know if this is because of an overseas of the source, the prices, rather the price increase is from the source of the supply, or if it is after it has been imported into the country. These are things that we will never be told by this government, but these are things that are very important for us to understand so that we know exactly what adjustments we need to make in policy in order to support the cost of living of people in this country.
I'm sure that the citizens of this country will agree with you. When we were suffering as a universe from the COVID pandemic, freights, ocean freights, were doubled. It affected the prices in this country. Mm-hmm. The government of Guyana blamed COVID for those price increases. Exclusively, COVID was responsible for this. That's what they said. COVID has gone, or so they say. Those freight charges have returned to what they were or close to what they were. The prices have not been affected locally. The prices in the stores and supermarkets do not reflect the reduction in freight as a benefit to the consumer. The government brags about having reduced the taxes on gasoline at the pump stations. That benefit has never gone down to the regular commuting public, going to work and going to school. Among a whole host of other measures, the business community, which is benefiting from these measures, has not been passing them on to consumers. Yet the government brags about having put these measures in place. They don't seem to care that the people who need the benefit most have not been getting it. Now we are at a place in our country where the productive sector, as you just pointed out, is slipping away, where we're almost entirely dependent on the oil and gas industry for existence. Mm-hmm. And where the Natural Resource Fund is being manipulated by the administration so that only a handful benefit from it. The infrastructure development program that they have is where half of the money is going and from which half of the money is disappearing. If oil hits a snag tomorrow, what happens to the economy of our country?
Well, for sure, it wouldn't be the fastest growing. because it's only because of oil. It has nothing to do, the growth, the speed with which our economy is growing has nothing to do with, any other part of the economy but that oil industry. And we need to recognize and appreciate that because, as you probably know, gold and oil alone last year, 2023, accounted for 94% of the foreign earnings that this country has.
Yeah, that's 94.
94%.
So if you
just those two.
Yeah, but if you factor in what the Minister of Agriculture said about Gaisuko, we've been doing well over 100%. Because he published that information saying Gaisuko contributes 10.9% or something like that.
No, that's the GDP, but I'm talking about foreign earnings.
Or-
I mean, oil alone accounted for 90%.
Foreign earnings.
Foreign earnings.
Yeah.
Gold accounted for 4% last year. So we have, at least according to the Bank of Guyana report, the GDP table, we have at least 29 industries, but one of them is government. So 28 industries that more or less rely on our private sector for things to happen.
Help me understand this. Help me understand this, please, Mr. Lucas. This country has a president, at least by title, who goes around the CARICOM region talking about food security, talking about agriculture, talking about reducing cost of food imports by 25% by 2025. He touts what he refers to as a Jagdeo initiative in agriculture within Caribbean. But our agricultural sector has been rapidly slipping away. How does a president get to a place where he can tell people of other countries what they should do in a particular sector when the sector in his country is dying? How do you wrap your head around that?
I mean, it's a contradiction of sorts, that I will admit. And when we think of the challenges that our agricultural sector faces in this country, I think it is indeed, it's interesting, I would say, that our government would be running around the place trying to tell other people how to fix their problems. One of the major problems we have in this country is the bottlenecks created by infrastructure, the weak infrastructure to support agricultural development in this country. It's all well and good, to be building and improving roads around Georgetown and so forth. But the places that could make a major difference to the quantity of goods supplied in this country and the price of those goods, because it would help to bring the average cost of production down, those areas are not getting the infrastructural support that is so badly needed to make a difference in the quantity of goods produced in this country and the prices associated with those goods. And so I really don't understand where he's getting the motivation or the courage to go out there to speak about these things. Because on the Jagdeo, I don't remember agriculture going anywhere.
Yeah, down.
Other than
down.
So I really and truly don't know what is his inspiration in this matter. But but all of this is coming right back to the refusal of this government to put proper institutions in place and to put the competent people in the position in those institutions to help manage them properly. So
I like where you're going there. The people of this country are paying for what Jagdeo refers to as an expanding healthcare system. What does he call an expanding healthcare system? Putting up new buildings. So that in Linden, you shut down the nursing school because Region 10 has too many nurses. And you're going to construct a building in Region 2. That's where the PPP prides itself with having some voter support. And they're going to put up a new building there and start a new nursing school because Linden in Region 10 doesn't support the PPP and therefore they don't deserve a nursing school. The bridge that was supposed to have been constructed across the Demerara River, linking the two shores of the river in Linden, was put on hold by the People's Progressive Party because the people there don't vote for them. The athletic track in Linden, from which community comes the highest number of track and field athletes, was put on hold because the people of Region 10 and Linden do not support the People's Progressive Party. So they're going to build one somewhere in Berbice. Discrimination in the allocation of resources and beneficial facilities hurts the person with conscience, which clearly tells us that the People's Progressive Party is devoid of conscience. Region 2 has a regional hospital at Sudi. No proper equipment, no proper maintenance for the meager number of equipment, inadequately staffed by medical professionals, but they're going to construct a new building to call it a new regional hospital. In my view, a waste of resources, misdirected resources. In Region 3, where there is a huge regional hospital complex, under-equipped, understaffed, improperly maintained, poor service. They're going to build a new hospital at Dikendren and call it the second regional hospital in Region 3.
Where is
Dikendren is...
Where's Dikendren
located? It is on the east. It is on the west coast, Demerara, right on the periphery, right on the border with East Bank Essequibo.
Precisely.
Right?
Precisely.
It is not as centrally located for access purposes as the West Demerara Regional Hospital is. And rumor has it that this government has sold the property on which sits the West Demerara Regional Hospital to a company associated with oil and gas. Hence the need to build that. But they have denied it. Time will tell. Time will tell. So all of these things are happening where resources are being misdirected so that edifices could be constructed so people can see. But the service and the quality of service is glaringly absent. The presence of discrimination is there for all to see. Where are we going as a country? Are these not contributory factors to the failing nature of this rich economy of ours?
Well, I don't want to be rude, but I would ask the question, what is the opposite to one Guyana? I mean, that's clearly the problem that we're facing. All that you have described is telling me that this is not about, a united Guyana where the priorities are reflective of the needs of communities, the usefulness of the investments in communities and so forth. It's not telling us that. And so I do not understand, how it is that the PPP can believe that the reallocation of resources in this country, in the manner in which it is being done, is being beneficial to the increase in output, particularly in the non-oil sector of our economy, and hence putting itself in a position to contribute to a reduction in the cost of living in this country. None of those that you just described could suggest that that is the intention of what they're doing. Because the more land you take out of agriculture is the less food we can be able to produce. And if you're telling people to go into more remote areas of this country to develop agricultural investments, the harder it becomes, because the infrastructure to support agriculture in Region 9 and parts of Region 10 and even Region 5 is not there. And, I wouldn't be surprised if you hear that investors who might be operating in some of those locations are giving up. I would not be surprised, because the infrastructure is not there. I mean, it's common sense,
I mean, if you look at Region 9, I'm happy you raised Region 9 in this conversation. Region 9 is the region in this country hardest hit by the effects of climate change. Region 9 suffers from floods in the rainy season and drought, very long periods of drought. The APNUAFC government started to explore the possibilities of and construction of reservoirs to store water during the rainy season to keep it off the surface of the land. And these ideas didn't come from the government. These ideas came from the people.
Yes.
The government embraced the suggestions, researched those suggestions, talked to a gentleman who had already done this, who had the experience, and who had the facility that he personally constructed as a success story. The government embraced that and started the process of duplicating what this private citizen had done. The government then, the APNUAFC government, embarked upon a well drilling exercise across the region to ensure that there was fresh water for people. These reservoirs will take water off the land in rainy season and will store water and have it available for agricultural purposes during the dry season. This government abandoned those plans, and the people of Region 9 find themselves in a situation no better than they complained of when we started to work on those issues. Clearly, therefore, going there and doling out cash grants, going there and taking gifts that will last a month or two, makes absolutely no sense when it comes to improving the quality of the lives of the people, 80% of whom are indigenous Guyanese living in Region 9. There is absolutely no plan except using money as a device to hoodwink people. And the citizens are wise enough to understand that they will take the resources that belong to them when given to them, but will make strategic decisions at the appropriate time. Region 9 can feed this country, but the developmental effort and the political will to take that development to the region is necessary. the People's Progressive Party sees indigenous peoples as a block of vote.
And that's all.
That's
Well,
it.
yeah, well, you may recall at one time we got most of our meat
And peanuts.
and peanuts out of Region 9.
Yeah.
Um, it was also a point from which a lot of the milk in this country, because it started in Region 9 and then they moved down to Region 10 in Moblissa.
Yeah.
and-
Pirara in 9 and
and-
Moblissa on the border between 10 and 4.
Right.
And
You
then
know,
there was Gold Digging and Pirara and so on.
So
down
you
in
had
Berbice.
I mean you had an opportunity, to convert Region 9 into what it could be, as you said, the breadbasket of not only Guyana but perhaps the Caribbean,
Of course.
and our southern neighbor, the northern reaches of our southern neighbor. But again, I'm saying to you that because there is no serious attention being paid to the institutions of government, because a lot of people believe that government is too bureaucratic, but government needs to be bureaucratic because government has no other authority other than a legal authority to do what it is doing, which means therefore it must follow the law. But a lot of people believe therefore the government must behave like the private sector, and I think many in the private sector believe that too. So they do things that forces the government to act in a manner that unfortunately is, contrary to the best interests of the people of this country. And so, with some of the corruption that you spoke about, one of your C's, which is very important, is driven by the fact that people are not treating the role of government in this country as seriously as they need to treat it. Government is not there just to throw away people's money because, up until recently, most of the money spent by the government comes from taxpayers, and they have a right to respond appropriately to the interests and concerns that taxpayers express. And if we have a concern about corruption and nothing is being done about corruption in this country, then the government is failing us. It's as simple as that. If we have an interest in increasing food supply in this country and the government is not doing anything to help us to really and truly increase that food supply while at the same time bringing our costs down, then they're failing us. They're not helping us. And so these are things that I hope people will pay attention to and understand how important it is to see the government change its behavior so that their lives could improve. People need to understand there's a link between how they're feeling right now, what they're experiencing right now, and the poor management of this economy by the government of Guyana. So they may be throwing a lot of money around the place. And by the way, a lot of the money that they're throwing around to small contractors and so forth was forced on them by the coalition government.
Which we discussed
Last week. Yes, it's forced on them.
But last week also, we were victims of the two power ships fighting for supremacy over who can give more blackout.
We'll stay afloat.
Who can give more blackout. And so we had to obviously do what we had to do to improvise and bring the program to the people. But yeah, we were victims of two power ships battling for blackout supremacy. Now, in the 5 or so minutes remaining, outside of energy supply, outside of the infrastructure side to support the local productive sectors, and of course, outside of change in the government, what can be done in the short term to change the numbers you gave us, 21% versus 13% locally produced goods diminishing?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, the solution that I have, perhaps I I'm not ready to talk about at this moment.
Yeah.
But clearly, what you want is something that incentivizes people to produce more. That's what you need. Guyanese need an incentive to produce more. And until they get that incentive, they will not produce more.
But there's a problem here. There's a problem here. When the PPP was in government in the early days, when they were in opposition, first of all, they said to their supporters, don't plant rice. Dr. Jagan, don't plant rice. You're going to make the PNC look good. Mine cow. And when they got into government, he asked them, the PPP asked them, were you mining cow for cow broke up the ground, broke up the land? You got to sell all them cow and plant rice. Rice got money, you know. And when they were torching those young sugar canes to cripple the economy under the People's National Congress in government, when they came to government, they took away the incentives that were given to the sugar workers to motivate them into producing at higher levels. The PPP is like George Orwell's Animal Farm, you know, in living manifestation. So they tell you that this is bad for you when they're in opposition, and they tell you the same thing is good for you when they're in government, as is the case with the voters list and biometrics. It was good for the people and them, the People's Progressive Party and the people of this country, when they lost the election. Having been reinstalled into government, it became a bad thing.
Biometrics.
So
well, again, I don't think you can escape the fact that for a country to, grow, people have to be producing. Of course, there's another element to that now, which I understand the PNC, the opposition says, for the country to grow, the PPP must go. But the point I'm making is, really and truly, for this country to grow, our people must be incentivized to produce more. And that incentive is not there.
But this is where I was going to in the couple of minutes remaining. Rice flour was a bad thing. But now there's a big businessman who's exporting rice flour from this country under the PPP, and they're keeping it under wraps. They don't want anybody to know that this man is planting rice, buying rice, milling rice, and exporting rice flour. It's a bad thing. When President Granger talked about having to eat foreign packaged plantain chips aboard aircrafts when we could in fact produce the same and perhaps a higher quality in our own country and export it. They said Granger wanted a plantain chip economy. I cannot wrap my head around the stupidity of some of the things that come from the People's Progressive Party,
but that's
when these things are critical to the growth and development of our country and the improvement of the quality of lives of our people.
Yeah, because I think part of that problem is people don't understand what the concept of manufacturing is. Because all of those activities are manufacturing activities. They may be low technology activities, but they are part of manufacturing. If you go through the International Standard Industrial Classification, you will see that activities like those are part of manufacturing. But as I said, they are not, as sophisticated.
But they are geared to elevate the quality of life and the economy of
that's the point.
The working poor.
That's what
the vulnerable who cannot relate to high-level technology.
That's what they must
So why would the PPP laugh at that?
Well,
they're mocking the poor among us.
I told you that's the contempt that they have for the people of this country. It comes from the contempt that they have for the people of this country. And people need to understand that. People need to see that. But you would be surprised at the number of people who have had to open stands at various parts of the city of Georgetown, various parapets and sidewalks and so forth, selling those very products for survival in this country.
Survival in Guyana.
Yeah.
Survival in Guyana, my brothers and sisters. That's about all we have time for, Nation Watch, except I'd like to say this. It is clear, very, very clear, that the People's Progressive Party loves poor people. Their love for poor people is so great that they will do everything within their power to increase the population of poor people in this country. And to close on a note of the party leader, for Guyana to grow, the PPP must go. Have a pleasant rest of the Sunday, and until we meet again, God bless.